Okay, all right, let's get started real quick because we know that Governor got you a seat right here at the front. And let's start off and introduce a couple guests so the Governor know who we have here with us. Of course, you know Dr. Perry, our Director of Schools, does an outstanding job, great school system. State Representative Rick Eldridge is with us. Raise your hand, Rick, so everybody knows him. Our County Mayor, Bill Breton, done a great job. Our sponsor for Youth Leadership, Hamblen County, is Stan Harville. Stan is a former principal and teacher. He's executive director of HC Ezell, and that's an education foundation this county formed over 20 years ago to enhance education in this county and workforce development. So they've been ahead of the curve. 30 years ago, okay. 30 years. All right, we got Chris Cates. Chris is vice president over at Walter State Community College. We got Jeff Kinsler, who's the principal here at Marshtown West, and we got Tim Landenfeld, who's principal for Marshtown West. So let's see, I think we got everybody else. Of course, we've got a few alumni graduates as well. So let's go here. Dr. Perry, you want to make a couple opening remarks, and then let's hear from the Governor, and then we'll have a short Q&A session.
Great.
You were so good last year, we invited you back, and you actually came. We are so honored.
Governor, on behalf of the Board of Education and the Office of Superintendent, we certainly do feel it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us this evening. So we know that your schedule is extremely busy and you've had many things on your plate this year, so we do appreciate you taking the opportunity to come out and be with us. And we do have a group of students with us today, and they're coming from a variety of places, from the classroom, from the track, from the tennis courts, different things. So we were able to dress some of them up and some of them had to come the way that they were. So, but we do feel it's an honor for you to be here with us this evening. And we have a group of students here involved in our student leadership group. So these are some of the brightest and best that we have, and we've been working with them all year through some challenging pieces, but we try to instill some leadership qualities in them, and having you here is a really nice way to cap off the school year. So Governor, welcome. We do appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks y'all for being here and for welcoming me back. And the most important guest, not a guest, but most important traveler with me is First Lady Maria. So we're proud to be back in this county, and especially glad to be back in front of students. Thank you for your leadership in this district. Y'all, it's been a hard year for schools, and it's been a incredibly challenging year for students, for teachers, for principals, for superintendents. We faced things that we had never faced before. Your teachers had to do things they'd never done before. Y'all did too, sitting here just like you are, even with wearing masks and distancing and quarantining and all the things that happened in the last year. You're to be commended, and the leadership in your school systems to be commended too. So we are deeply grateful for what's happened in Tennessee. And you may not realize this, but what's happened in Tennessee is not what's happened in a whole lot of school districts across this country. There are states that still the kids are not in class. And they've been over a year now with not being in school. And we know that in-person learning is the best way for kids to learn. So we're just very grateful to be here. And Representative Eldridge is here. The legislature came together in a special session, we call it, in January, to address some of the challenges associated with education. I won't get into all that, but I'll just tell you, most states in the country didn't do that. Our General Assembly did, and we instituted ways that will be particularly helpful for young kids, K through 3, and the losses they incurred while being out of the classroom. So we've done a lot of work. At the end of the day, here's the thing. Y'all are the next generation of Tennesseans. You're the people that will be in leadership roles. You're the ones that will be standing here and there and there. And our desire in our education system is to invest in you. We wholeheartedly believe schools are about kids. That's what it's about. They're about young people and their development. And I'm especially proud to stand before y'all because you're a leadership class, and that means that you probably, for whatever reason, whatever roles you play, and whatever, wherever you find yourself in your school, you're a leader. And it matters who leads. We say that a lot in government, but it does matter who leads, because there are young people in your community, and you know this because you're in leadership, you're in leadership class, you're best and brightest. There are a lot of kids who look to leaders and follow them. Your ability to influence others for good is, you don't have to wait till you're an adult to do that. You have a powerful opportunity to do that right now. And there's a lot of kids who need leadership. There's a lot of kids who are looking for who they are and figuring out what path they're going to take and what direction they're going to go and what their value system is. And you create all of that before you become an adult. And so having models like you who can inspire other young people around you to walk in the things that God has created them to walk in. That's the end goal for every single one of us is, why are we here? Why have we been created? Why have we been put in the spot? And frankly, why have we endured some of the challenges we have? There are people in this room who've had some hard things happen, or some difficult circumstances in their life, or struggles. But I do believe God's a redeemer, and He takes the toughest things in our life, and if we allow Him to, He uses them to be transformative, and He uses them to transform you. So I already can say I'm proud of you because of the fact that you're sitting here, you're in this leadership role in this community. You're going to be leading this community. You're going to be leading this state. You're going to be leading this nation. Whether you stay here or end up in another spot, it's up to the next generation. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because it's not for old guys like me. It's for young people like you. And to the degree that we can invest in you and create an environment where you can be successful, that's how we invest in the future of our state. So I'm proud to be here. The best thing I can do is probably answer your questions. It might be more interesting to you than have you listen to me drone on. So why don't we do that? If y'all have a you got a Q&A spot? Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's start off. We've divided our questions into office questions about your role or your job.
All right.
And then also we have some life or leadership questions for you as well.
All right.
So our first office question comes from Trinity Ely.
Hi, Trinity.
Hello. Okay. What made you want to run for governor?
What made me want to run for governor? I was a very blessed guy. I had a really, really great life, and was in business and had 4 kids. And I had a tragedy in my life. So 20-something years ago, my first wife was killed when I was 40 years old, and I had 4 little kids. And it was a very, as you can imagine, it was one of those things I talked about earlier, when something really challenging hits your life. It was transformative for me. It did make me think about the rest of my life and how short life is, and how we got to be about things that matter, and how we're not ever guaranteed tomorrow. I got involved in, besides my work, I got involved in nonprofit work, serving in the community. So I mentored some kids in the inner city and got real interested in education and education reform. I mentored men coming out of prison through a nonprofit reentry program and a prison ministry, and I got very engaged and interested in criminal justice reform. And I got so engaged that I started being on some state-related task forces and committees that were run by the state. Had a little bit of interaction with state government, and started thinking I was at a time in life, this was 4 or 5 years ago, where my kids were mostly grown and my business was in a good spot, and maybe I could use my life to impact other people in a more meaningful way than I had been. So one thing led to another, and we talked about it, prayed about it every day for a year, felt like we had an answer, and we're probably unlikely to have win a campaign because I'd never even run for office in my whole life, but didn't know much about politics or government, but decided to do it. And we ran, and turns out that we won. So that's how I got involved, and that's how I ended up being governor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good question. Our next question also concerns the office. Caleb Hall has the next question. Hannah Edwards on deck.
Caleb, I have a son and a grandson named Caleb, so I have a particular affinity for that name.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
What do I enjoy most about it? Stuff like this. When you get to get out of the Capitol and leave Nashville and go out into the community and meet people and meet with people and remind yourself that, you know, we live in a really wonderful country that has a very unique system of government, and it is a government of the people. And so through elected officials like Rick Eldridge and others, the people actually decide what they want the laws to be, what they want their communities to be like. And if you lose touch with the people, then you kind of forget that they're actually in charge. Like, I work for you and the people of Tennessee because that we're elected to serve. So what I like most is getting out into the communities, and especially, I think, getting out in front of young people.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Okay, Miss Hannah Edwards.
Hey, Hannah.
Hello. What's been your toughest decision to make since you were elected governor, and why?
Toughest decision, we have the death penalty in Tennessee, and that means that a governor has the ability to decide whether someone ultimately gets executed for the crime that they've committed. And it's a very, very difficult decision, probably the most difficult decision that I have had to make, and that decision has come about more than once, so that we've had multiple of those. The law in this state is the death penalty, and so the people of this state, because of the way we operate, have made the decision through their elected officials that that is the penalty for the most heinous of crimes. Nevertheless, as a person who ultimately has that responsibility to make that decision, it's the toughest day of the year for me. It's the most difficult decisions there are. I take every one of them incredibly seriously and read all the information before I make decisions and go over it and over it and over it again. But that's the toughest decision, and you can probably imagine why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question comes from Dermot, and he came in from track practice, so
I see that.
he probably ran over here. He's dedicated.
No, I walked. Okay. In your opinion, what is your first responsibility as governor?
There are a lot of responsibilities. I think the first responsibility is to provide for the security of the people. Ultimately, we have the responsibility to protect our citizenry. We do that through law enforcement. That's why law enforcement is so, it's not the only way we do it, but that's why law enforcement is so important. It's why it's so unfortunate in this day and time when there is disparaged commentary about law enforcement and the role, but they're the line between chaos and order, and they allow the government to provide order and protection for the citizenry. That's probably the most important role I have. I'll say the second one is being a wise steward of taxpayer dollars. So the citizens pay taxes. That's the budget that the government has to operate, and we have to make decisions about how that money is going to be spent. And it's not our money It's not the government's money, it's the people's money. And so to be fiscally responsible, to be a wise steward, to spend that money in a way that is the way taxpayers would want it to be spent. So managing the budget is probably the least sexy part of our job, the least exciting things to talk about, but it's probably arguably right up there as one of the most important things I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Lydia Fishman with the next question, please.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi. What are some things that you'd hope to focus on but couldn't because COVID got in the way?
Kind of everything. So here's what happened when COVID hit. We put together, every year, we create an agenda of items that we want to work on with the legislature. And we work with them to create a whole host of bills and initiatives that we want to work on. For example, criminal justice reform, or the expansion of broadband, or the investment in a mental health trust fund for K-12, or there are dozens of investments and initiatives that we propose in our budget every year. And we do that at the beginning of the legislative session. Then they come, we decide what the initiatives are going to be that we are going to pass, and approve the budget. Well, last year, right in the middle of that process, we had worked all year long to develop this initiative, that bill, that initiative, and then COVID hit. And we didn't know what was going to happen to the economy. We did know that there was going to be a massive economic downturn, which there was. And we knew that, back to my responsibility about being a good fiscal manager and a steward of taxpayer dollars, we knew that it was our responsibility to respond to what was coming from an economic standpoint. So we made the decision to take every initiative, everything that we had wanted to work on for the year, and everything that we'd worked on for the year, and we removed every single one of them from the table. We took them off the table. We canceled every initiative. We canceled every bill that had $1 attached to it. And we virtually did nothing legislatively in that previous year. So there were a lot of things that we didn't do because of COVID. We brought many of those things back, in fact, all of them back. And because we managed COVID in a way that allowed us to have enough money to invest, we reinvested, and we got a lot of those things done in the legislative session that just ended. So we pushed it all off the table, and then we were allowed to bring it back and get it done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to, in order to allow some time for some photos later, let's move into an area of some live questions. And Alexi Cowan, come on up with a live question. And this is a good time to mention, last night we honored Stan Harville and Chris Cates with our Volunteer of the Year awards. So we're kind of big on servant leadership.
It's awesome.
So Alexi, I'll give you the live question.
Thank you for being here with us today.
Yes.
My question is, who was your biggest inspiration when you were our age in high school?
Gosh. I was going to say my dad was the biggest influence, a positive influence on my life throughout my life. But when I was 17 or 18 years old, it was this phase in my life where I didn't think my dad knew anything, and I thought I knew everything. And so probably at that moment, I wouldn't have said he was my greatest influence. But nevertheless, he continued to love me through that season of life. And I would say he was the most impactful person. Even in the season when he and I didn't see things eye to eye, he was the most impactful person in my life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Grace Harrison has our next question. It's kind of like that old quote, it's amazing how much my old man learned in those 20 years,
that's
isn't it?
right.
In your experience, what leadership traits or characteristics have proven to be most helpful?
So these are not things that I always exhibit myself, and I haven't mastered the ability to do so, but I do believe that humility, genuineness, the real concept that you talked about, servant leadership, where you recognize that, you know, God created every single person, and every one of them has immense value and dignity, and that none is greater than the other. We have real differences in the way we view life, and the real disagreements on what's important and what's not. But there's no disagreement to me that person that I may or may not agree with, and that may or may not like me and whatever, that they have as much value and worth, and they are as important as a human as I am. And that way, and I also do have I'm a guy of deep faith, and my faith in Christ is the most important thing in my life. And because of that, Scripture says we should, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord with all your heart, but the second one's like it's to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you really believe that, then serving your neighbors, whoever they are, and whoever they are, is a commandment. But it also goes well for you when you do that. I think anybody who, at the end of their life, if they've pursued humility and pursued serving and loving their neighbors and as themselves, their regrets will be few, likely. And so I think that's what I strive to do. I don't always do it, but I'm working on it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Emily Morrow, come on down.
Hi, Emily.
What is the best advice, career or life, that anyone has ever given you?
The best advice. I should have read that question ahead of time and thought about it. So I can go a couple ways with that. One of them would be spiritual, and I was encouraged and reminded early on that if I would always turn back to that which I knew and my faith, even if I strayed away from it, if I would remind myself to go back, that it would go well for me. Also, remember being told, if you can learn to say, I'm sorry, and then have no caveat after that. I'm sorry, but I was just trying to do this, or I'm sorry, but I didn't really, or I'm sorry, but, and if you can stop at I'm sorry, it's one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard. Because if you really are sorry, then there is no caveat and you don't have to explain yourself. And I think that goes back to humility. It's real hard to do that sometimes, especially if you don't think you're wrong. You can be sorry that something happened. You might not think you did the wrong thing, but you're sorry that it happened, and I'm sorry. That was one of the pieces of advice that I still don't know how to do very well, but I'm still working on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this question, I think, may be a little bit similar in nature, so you may have to
Expound on it.
expand upon it a little bit. So Rachel Nestor has our last question, and then after that, we're going to do some photos real quickly.
All right. Hi, Rachel.
What advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
Now remember your 16-year-old self, those things which
Well, the last things I said would be certainly true. Don't ever forget what you know to be true, and don't ever, no matter where you stray away, don't ever forget to go back to the truth. The sorry thing is important. I think, too, and I would say this to you, it's hard when you're 16 or 17 or 18 to really think that the decisions that you're making today will profoundly affect the entire rest of your life. Probably a lot more so than when you're 25 or 30 or 35. Certainly, that's not always true. You make decisions at 25 that might take your life this direction or that direction. But the truth is that when you're yet to be fully an adult and you're making decisions about values, about hard decisions about what's right and wrong and which path I'm going to choose, decisions about your education and what educational path you're going to pursue, how committed you are to the things that you know are things that you want to be about. I was with a guy last night who was in prison and had been out, and he's been out for 10 years now. And I've come to know him and become very good friends with him. And he's moving away. We're very good friends, but he's leaving and he's moving away. We've been great friends for years. And so I knew it was probably the last time we were ever going to hang out together. And I just said, you're about to move, you're about to change your life, you're about to go in a different direction. You really ought to ask yourself, what about my life right now today do I wish were different? And it doesn't mean you can change it all tomorrow. And I'm not talking about things that you had no control over, things that have happened to you or circumstance, or even decisions that you've made. But today is a brand new start on the very rest of your life. And when you're 16, you have a lot of the rest of your life, which means that the decisions that you make, good or bad, what you're going to pursue, who you're going to hang out with, what you're going to the decisions that you make will exponentially more powerfully impact what your life is like when you're my age than probably any time in your life. A whole lot of your future is determined in the next 4 or 5 or 6 years of your life. A whole lot of your future. If I were 16 and probably somebody said that to me and I didn't pay attention to it, but as an old man now I can look back and say that if I could have gotten that said to myself, if I could have told myself, you better be not afraid, because you got to live life to the fullest, but you better be darn sure and darn careful and very intentional about the decisions you're going to make in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, including this Friday night and Saturday night and next Tuesday and Thursday. Be really aware that it can profoundly impact the rest of your life. Thank you, sir. Thank you.